The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, 1964, the Vietnam War. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, or the USS Maddox Incident, is the event responsible for America's entry into the Vietnam War. Vietnam was divided into halves, North and South, ruled by separate regimes, but the United States were concerned that Ho Chi Minh and the Communists would win the upcoming elections and were determined to stop the spread of communism.
A U.S. Navy destroyer, the USS Maddox, was cruising the waters of the Gulf of Tonkin, a body of water located off the coast of northern Vietnam. The Maddox was engaged in an intelligence collection mission. Reportedly, 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats appeared out of nowhere and fired on the Maddox unprovoked. The Maddox wasn't harmed in the attack and called in an airstrike to repel the boats. Another destroyer, the USS Turner Joy, was sent in to support the Maddox. And on August 4th, there was supposedly a second incident involving North Vietnamese boats attacking the American ships.
As President and Commander-in-Chief, it is my duty to the American people to report that renewed hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas in the Gulf of Tonkin have today required me to order the military forces of the United States to take action in reply.
August 5th, Johnson made a public speech stating, "The determination of all Americans to carry out our full commitment to the people and to the government of South Vietnam will be redoubled by this outrage." Shortly after his speech, U.S. aircraft bombed North Vietnamese targets, torpedo boat bases, and an oil storage depot. America was now drawn into the Vietnam War. President Johnson made a speech via the media to the American people to get their support for the war and described the attack on 2 U.S. Navy warships as a deliberate aggression. By late 1965, 200,000 American troops were on the ground, with more on the way.
U.S. involvement in Vietnam quickly escalated from just advising South Vietnamese allies to a full-scale open war, a war that lasted for over a decade. 6 years after passing the resolution, Congress would have voters' remorse. LBJ was out of office, and Richard Nixon was president. The American body count in Vietnam continued to rise, and popular support for the war continued to fall. So at the end of 1970, Congress said, "We're repealing the Gulf of Tonkin resolution." It was too late to affect the events in Vietnam. That ship had sailed.
The attack on the U.S. destroyers by Vietnamese PT boats never happened. It was a completely staged event to have an excuse to enter the war. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stated years later that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a mistake, while many other insiders and officers have come forward, relaying that it was a contrived farce, a complete lie.
Herrick sent a later message claiming that he was mistaken about the attack and that freak weather action may have led his men to overreact. The final part of the message read, "No actual visual sightings by Maddox. Suggest complete evaluation before any further action taken." Nevertheless, this was ignored by Johnson and his advisors, who continued on with the retaliation plan.
But James Stockdale, a U.S. aircraft pilot who witnessed the second attack, claimed, "Our destroyers were just shooting at phantom targets. There were no torpedo boats there. There was nothing there but black water and American firepower." Stockdale believed the event that sparked America's war in Vietnam was a military mistake.
But opposition to the war was growing. Voices of those objecting to U.S. involvement in Vietnam were getting louder. In May of 1970, 4 students were killed by National Guard troops during a campus protest at Kent State University in Ohio. In April of '75, North Vietnamese troops approached the southern capital of Saigon. President Gerald Ford ordered all U.S. troops and citizens out of the country.
Permit the movement of refugees to the area of their choice.
And on April 29th, Armed Forces Radio began playing White Christmas to signal an evacuation was underway.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.